I think we might be a little bit of an outlier because what we've heard so far is how we can use AI to find out things. And for us, it's almost a little bit the opposite. We've been in the market for 100 years, and we kind of went the other way and now have science to help us find out the mechanism that we've seen in our day-to-day. We've really seen people who come to us since the time of my grandfather. They do an intervention that is 12 to 14 days, and they just come out anew. My great-grandfather himself had a rheumatoid arthritis, and he was bound in a wheelchair. And his doctor said, well, you know, the best thing you can hope for is that it doesn't get worse. And so he tried a water-only fast for 19 days, which saved his life and existence. And he got out of the wheelchair and has been since then examining this method. This morning, we've heard from Matthias Chöp about a very potent intervention, which are the GLP-1s. And we believe that we have the most potent non-pharmacological intervention. And it was funny because some of the slides that you have with a fatty liver before and after, we have also in some of our presentations, but his had 52 weeks and ours have 2 weeks where we see the changes. We see ourselves as the biggest fasting laboratory in the world because we exist since 1920. We have 103 years of continuous medical practice. And since we have 2 clinics, and these 2 clinics, we did the calculation once, had 500,000 patients pass through them. And in health, if something works for a long time, then usually it's seen as a good thing. And we have also now, since a couple of years, our own research team. We have 3 fully dedicated scientists. One of them is Dr. Mesnage, who will say some things as well. But the question is, what we get asked a lot is, why does a mid-sized clinic have an own research department? Well, here you see my mother in the 80s who goes to all these conferences and she says, I see all these incredible things. And then she gets the same reply always, okay, but can you prove it? Since then, we've had collaboration with King's College, which is where Dr. Mesnage is from. We collaborated with ETH, with Charité, with Princeton, with the University of Milan. We did the biggest long-term fasting study in the world with 1,422 participants, where we just proved that it's safe and efficacious. And then we did some other studies which you can read on, and some of which we will discuss right now. But some of the people also always want to tell them, okay, fasting. This is like, I have, by nature of what I do, I have this discussion a lot, and a lot of people say, I could never do it, and why should I even do it? I'm not overweight, you know. And we have now this new kind of wave of longevity where people understand, and we have all our lives which we just can't stress off, which we just can't shut off the stressors of modern life. All of them which we have here, and these leave some marks in our health, which are, you can read them: visceral fat, low inflammation, insulin resistance, oxidative stress, so on and so forth. And so what we do is really clearing these things in one single potent intervention, which Dr. Mesnage will tell you how.
Yeah, because if you had told me that 10 years ago I would sit here now, I would be laughing because I would be in the public as a skeptic, one of these doctors saying, well, your papers, fasting, this is dangerous. It's not tolerable. That's something gurus are doing in the mountains. Like, keep that away from medicine. But now I am here, and I did some clinical studies, I read some papers, and I can tell you now that there is a clear consensus in science that fasting is really the most potent non-pharmacological thing that you could do for recovering metabolic health, for your longevity. And there is really a consensus, and I'm often doing the challenge that if you have a method which is more powerful than fasting or calorie restriction, more validated in science, in extending healthy longevity, champagne is on me. And it's because it's clear. What does the laboratory rat which lived the longest, the mouse which lived the longest, the monkey which lived the longest, what do they have in common? They were in a laboratory experiment with fasting. And it's because fasting is really activating this ancestral program of regeneration that we have, and which can really activate and modulate all the hallmarks of aging. And we did these experiments on all the hallmarks of aging, and we showed for visceral fat, fasting is making you lose some weight, you eliminate the visceral fat, this fat is inflammatory, and if you have this fat, for instance, in the liver, this is what we were talking about this morning, this is a risk factor which is difficult to address, but with fasting you can eliminate it, and we just published a couple of weeks ago that this is even something which persists after 4 months. Inflammation, this is also something which is due to this visceral fat. We can clearly see that inflammation is addressed. This is why fasting has all these benefits on rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, but on other inflammatory conditions. And I can tell you one story about fasting and inflammation. We have a clinical trial right now which is running at Charité, and we are testing fasting as a rehabilitation method before hip surgery. And actually we have a problem, but it's a good problem for us because the patients who are doing fasting, they feel so good that they don't want to go into the surgery afterwards. Fasting is also a way to recover insulin sensitivity, and you know that type 2 diabetes is really an epidemic, and fasting is really the best way of reverting type 2 diabetes, because it's not just like the medication where you take one by one and accumulate over decades, which are basically just managing the symptom. Fasting is really treating the root cause of insulin resistance, and in our latest study, after 3 months after the patient left the clinic, half of the pre-diabetic patients regained normal insulin control. They were not anymore pre-diabetic. Oxidative stress, this is a classic hallmark of aging. We measured it in our patient, and in just 10 days we could see that total antioxidant defense were increased by fasting. We understood why mechanistically, and then oxidative stress was decreased. This is a classic hallmark of aging, which explains why also fasting has all these effects on longevity. Autophagy, this is also a classic hallmark of longevity. There was even a Nobel Prize in 2016 awarded for the discovery of autophagy, which is this mechanism where your cells are recycling their components where they are under some stress to make new ones. And we also proved that during fasting at our clinic, autophagy was activated in our patients. The gut microbiome is also heavily remodeled during fasting, and because fasting has also this anti-inflammatory effect, we see dramatic improvements in some conditions like inflammatory bowel disease and syndrome. Basically, fasting is really addressing all these conditions which are inflammatory and having a metabolic disturbance as a source. And altogether, you can see that by contrast to some pharmacological solution which target one symptom at a time, fasting is really holistic. You target all the hallmarks of aging, and this is why it can be very holistic into treating some disease or like having some preventative health. And for us, this is also a way of empowering patients, because in this case, you are also not under the stress of having to depend on a medication, of having to trust some information on the internet. You discover that your body can heal by yourself, for yourself, and this is something that you can do also to regain control on your health. We are also collaborating with the clock father, so Steve Horvath, who discovered epigenetic clocks, which are integrators of health aging that you can use to predict disease or resolution of this disease with biological aging. That's an article that we published, that we submitted just today actually to Nature Aging. And now we are going more and more into the personalization. That's an article which is submitted to Nature Metabolism, where because we want to define fasting as a tool for mainstream medicine, we have put together data from several thousand patients where we describe what can be expected depending on different times of fasting, depending on the BMI of the patient, the age, the sex, so that we describe reference ranges about what can be expected and what can be expected also by our doctor, so that they know that, for instance, this is cholesterol day, so we have cholesterol here. If you look at the change in LDL cholesterol during fasting, you can see that if you want some clinically meaningful effect, you should come for at least 8 days of fasting. And 8 days of fasting, this sounds something terrible, but actually this is something which is not just tolerable, but also which can make you happy.
And to prove it, we again asked in. Thank you. In our study, we just asked people subjectively, how do you feel on a scale from 1 to 10? And this is very counterintuitive every time we show the slide, but this is 1,422 people. And you see that actually even after day 10, 15, perceived well-being, how do you feel today, increased. And this is the thing that most people can't believe it until they've actually done it. And we have a Nobel Prize, and we're in the House of Literature. One of our best clients was Mario Vargas Llosa, and he did the best discourse on Buchinger that we've ever heard. And he ended it with saying, for those who know, they know, fasting is a pleasure. And then also the thing with longevity science is also how do you, because the thing that you have to prove, you actually have to see that the person has to have, you know, in 10 years, what happens in 20 years. And since we exist since 100 years, we actually have Mr. Klaptor as a client, and he did 100 cures with us. So, and we measured his biological age. He's actually 92. His biological age was 86. So when we published that, all of a sudden we had a lot of 90-year-olds who wanted to come to the clinic. So it was a bit more of a geriatric situation, but just to show you that it's safe and that this is really a rhythm. This is something for us that we believe that in a year with everything that accumulates, everybody should have this pause for your body in 1 year. And also, just to sum it up, it's not just something that is a number, it drops all numbers, but it's something that is really, some people liken it to bringing the car to the repair or something like this. It's really for body, mind. It sounds always a bit like, you know, like these phrases that everybody says it's for body and mind, but it's really an all-round rest for those things. And then also people say, like, I can't fast every day. How to think about it? And like most clinics, we have our model of healthy longevity, and just that fasting, when you eat, is one of our pillars. So we recommend intermittent fasting, and once a year we also recommend long-term fasting. And I want to dedicate this to my mother, who passed away recently, and she always stole the sentence from Steve Jobs, stay hungry, stay foolish. And this is Robin, who is in an MRI eating his apple to break his fast. Thank you very much.